Welcome to T.S.O.B with Dr. G, a podcast featuring intellectual table talk about race and sexuality. I'm your host, Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert, a sexuality educator, writer, and researcher. Join me as I talk with the most brilliant minds in human sexuality, applying a professional Black lens to discussions about sexiness, health, and healing in the new millennium. It's T.S.O.B, the sex ed of Black folk. Let's get to the get down, shall we? So, we begin this episode with a little bitty secret. Last week's episode did not go the way it was supposed to go. What was initially a conversation between three amazing, dope-ass people ended up, after significant, unfortunate technical issues, being truncated into a conversation between just two. Thankfully, because this is Black Music Month and in the music world there is such a thing as a remix, we were able to partially make up some of what happened in that original conversation. And so I'm going to share that with you all in this bonus episode. So without further ado, please enjoy this remix of episode 13, the soundtrack of Sex Ed, again featuring Louie Ortiz-Fonseca, along with special guest Dominique Morgan. All right. You know what? We don't even have to do a intro because I already got that set up. Let's just jump in. So tell me, apparently the Jackson brothers accepted an apology that nobody in the Black community approved. Like, how?
Not even Janet. Like, see, this
How?
you know what? I didn't even read that article. I saw, when you log on to like Google and you see the snippets of
Yeah.
articles that you can read. I saw that and rolled my damn eyes because, like, if I didn't hear from Janet,
Which,
and
like,
why would they
it's
do that
invalid.
near her birthday? Like,
Right.
so I don't even know which brothers it was.
And just it's the audacity for me to feel that you are authorized to accept an apology for something that did not actually happen to you.
Well, and as though Justin has done a real apology. Like,
Also,
you know what I'm saying? Like, that's like, not only are you accepting something for me, but you've accepted something subpar for me. Like,
Right.
level, based on, I was randomly watching like a NSYNC. It was like this deep dive on JC Chazé, like his career being robbed. And there was this whole piece where I didn't know that after the Super Bowl, JC was supposed to announce his album at like the Pro Bowl. And because of what Justin did at the Super Bowl, they canceled JC at the Pro Bowl, and his album never got. And he said in the interview, like, Justin just was like, I'm sorry. But looking back, if you think about, like, JC Chazé was a vocalist. And so, like, that moment, that decision by Justin had ripples. And I just think something that was so impactful, we need one good speaking circle at least. Somebody need to have patchouli out. We need incense. Like, this is not an Apple No press release. This is,
it's a come to Jesus moment. Like a
sure,
like
sure. But it was funny. It was funny when I saw that because I was just thinking this week, my goodness, one, the impact of what he did and the audacity of her brothers to really silence her and low-key like minimize the impact of what he did.
Right.
And how it impacted her as a Black woman.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So everybody, this is going to be a little bit unorthodox of an episode just because we had some hateration and the holleration the last time we came together to speak. And so we are doing a remix where we're bringing in some pieces that represent the old original conversation and some pieces that represent the new conversation. So right now we are actually recording this portion the day after Janet Jackson, the great patron saint Janet Jackson, celebrated her birthday. So we are having a moment to lift her up and just acknowledge the ways that somehow men decided they wanted to I can't even explain it. Like, just decide that they were authorized to speak for Janet, to atone for the fuckery that was exacted on our queen. And so We just want
Damn
to,
Tito, Jackie, and
like,
Marlon.
Tito, how
Like
dare
they got
you?
who is asking them questions? No shade. But like y'all couldn't even get Jermaine on the line.
like,
Y'all
like,
got Tito,
really?
Jackie, and Marlon? Okay, I'm done.
Listen, I already said if Jermaine ain't out here singing, if you say my eyes are beautiful with somebody, I don't want to hear from him.
Or,
That's all I want
well,
to
he can
hear.
do Why Don't You? But even then, why don't you do what you did? Why don't you not do what y'all just did and do that
Listen.
again? Um,
My God.
all right,
My
so let
God.
me back it up because I want to pull in at least a couple pieces from the first interview. Dominique, in particular, when you and I talked, and I mentioned we got to talking about music, and I told you I was going to talk to Louie, you were like, "Okay, I'm about to be on this conversation. I need to be here." Tell us what made you so adamant about joining this conversation, and particularly sex ed, all of that.
Well, I mean, I love y'all, and y'all know what y'all talking about when y'all talk about music. I think you remember last year in the summer in the pandemic, like Louie and I have kikied about music from the jump. But Tracy, I think the first time we had some great moments was it was like the versus battles when we was trying to
Oh
build
yeah,
these in our head, and I love people who just remember that time of music that impacted my life. So I just thought it would just be a beautiful moment. But on the other side of it, like music is our it's like our Van Gogh, it's our Rembrandt as black folks, right? What we experience is in our music. And what I've experienced as a sex educator is that these young people, they're not only like expressing themselves through their music, they think it's like the Bible of
yes.
how they're supposed to live. And it's perpetuating a lot of harm. And so I try
Mm-hmm.
to be up on it currently, just to, yo, this is what these babies are like. We were ingesting Whitney Houston and All the Man That I Need, and the problematicness in, You Give Good Love, and
Right.
side chick things from SWV, and these babies are digesting something else. And so I think music and sex ed is really powerful and a great intersection, and we shouldn't just talk about it when y'all want to make a really
Right.
terrible campaign and put that same
Yes.
type of song out there for these kids.
Absolutely. And so at some point I do want us to talk about kind of what you said about the new conversation and what young folks are learning now. But I really want to bring in a little bit more of kind of what our experience was like, right? So thinking back to what it was like for you growing up, what lessons do you feel like you learned about sex and sexuality from the music you grew up listening to? If you feel like you learned anything at all.
I think for me, and I don't remember what I said last time, so I'm gonna just keep it a buck,
Go ahead.
because this maybe been like 2 months and just a lot
I
happened.
was gonna say,
This
don't
the
even.
So I'm not even the same person anymore.
Right, for real,
Exactly.
bitch. Get into the highlight. Because if
Exactly.
she's piecing this together, get into the skin, honey. But these estrogen months hit different. But because you just be like, oh, I didn't know I knew this.
Yes.
Looking back, I think we fell in love with love. We didn't really get a lot of critical analysis of love.
Hmm.
We were kind of told to just kind of stand by your man in all circumstances, and pleasure. And for me, before I identified as a black trans woman and socialized as such, I still held a very femme space in the world. And it was about sex was about pleasing the man. When
Mm,
you heard a woman saying about sex, it was like, I want to sex you up. And when it was a man talking about it, I want you to freak me. Not I'm gonna freak you, not I'm gonna make you have an orgasm, not I'm gonna suck your titties. It's freak me.
right.
And so I think those are big things. It was a lot of fairy tale, a lot of servitude, and a lack of critical analysis of what I deserve versus what I'm giving out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I was sitting with that because I hear a lot of young folks now, and I know that's every generation does that, right? They go back and they think through like, oh, I love the music from back in the day. And so I feel like a lot of what we hear now is people talking about, oh, a 90s R&B kind of love. And I'm like, do y'all really listen to the 90s R&B? Because I feel like that's not the kind of love that I feel like anybody needs to be experiencing. Like I honestly say, I'm like, if you say you want a 90s R&B love, it's because you've never heard 70s soul. That's my perspective. But Louis, what do you say? What do you feel like you learned, or what do you feel like are the themes and the big pieces of 90s music?
I would echo everything that you and Dominique said, and also I think that I also learned that it could be fun and romantic because what I saw in the context of my real life wasn't that. It wasn't candlelight,
Mm,
right? It wasn't, no one ever talked about sex. And when they did, it was usually to demean a woman or someone who was femme presenting, right? So, like, these 90s songs that obviously were very choreographed, that gave this
yes.
message, as Dominic said, like you have to, that, women have to do the work around pleasing a man, right? Like, I'm gonna get my hair done, I got my nails done,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be good
I'm
tonight,
waiting
right?
for
Like, it's like,
you.
yes,
Mm.
yes. So I did learn all of that and didn't necessarily subscribe to that as I became an adult because that sounded just a lot like a lot of work, right? Like I'm just not that committed. Like, it's not even that I
Yes.
agree or disagree. It just sounds like a
I'm
lot.
just lazy.
But it did give me, and part of it was fairy tale, and also that relationships could be different from what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, as I got older, with, the Janet album, which came out in 1993, there was this kind of like, if Janet can talk about sex over a hot beat, and it wasn't subversive.
Yeah.
It was like, anytime, I remember thinking anytime any place was like this, like this brave song, like, you're gonna kiss any place, anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you are really in charge of your life, Janet.
Yes, you got the control. Yes. She said control and went all out. Right, 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 right. I love that because too, I think there's also a conversation that could be had about the ways that sexuality became, I don't want to say this in a like blaming way, but like became more explicit in terms of people owning it more. Like back in the day, people wouldn't say, I want to, lick your titties. I want to do this explicit thing. They, I want to treasure, get caught up in the rapture. Right. But it did kind of feel a little bit more empowering to hear like, no, anywhere, anytime, any place, like we can, there was much more of a explicit in thinking about like folks like Adina Howard, like I will be a freak until the day, until the dawn, which feels very much like a pledge, like a pledge of allegiance.
Baby, and I took that pledge. But going back to Janet, I think because Janet's album, 1993 Janet, period.
Hmm.
She was on the period shit before, City Girls,
Right.
came after Madonna's Erotica,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And Erotica, I mean, Madonna always pushed what was, marketed as this woman and artist who pushed the envelope, and she most certainly did in, several aspects of her career. But I didn't relate to Erotica in the same way that Janet's,
Yeah.
and it was because Janet is a black woman,
Right.
and it didn't come across as sexual, like shock, in order
Right.
for to shock other people. It was like, this is my reality, and it was the reality of, what I talked about with a lot of my girlfriends after school on the block. So I just wanted to, like, mention that because I think when people talk about Janet's, her coming, quote unquote, coming into her sexuality, that larger mass mainstream media doesn't mention that it was a black woman,
Yeah.
and that it did come after erotica,
Yeah.
right? And I think we need to say that, like,
Yeah. And I love that you've mentioned that because I think too, it does, to use what the kids say, it does hit different that black women and black femmes and just black folks, period, were making those claims at the time, because I think it does bring in this certain level of relevance that just isn't the same when it's Madonna, right? Like you brought up SWV, Dom, and I'm thinking about like I didn't realize how many of their songs were about being side chicks until you listen and it's like, oh yeah. But there was just this idea of like, oh, these are girls who are just like me, right? They're from my lived experience. They're from my neighborhoods. They're from my, like, they look like girls I could have gone to school with. And so I'm curious for you all, like, how you feel like, if at all, that might have affected the ways that even young people take in the music and like resonate with the music? Like, does it matter that the person is Black? Like, what role do you feel like the identity of the person producing the music has in terms of what people take in, what people like maybe even are willing to embody versus, oh, I'm just listening to a song?
I think it's two parts. I think absolutely race does have a play to it. But what I also was thinking about when Louie was sharing is that I think video concepts played a
Mm.
part.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you think about those videos of those videos from Janet, or you think about Saving All My Love for You, you see Whitney in the studio, you're here listening to the beautiful voice, and then it's 4 or 5 times for maybe you go back to the lyrics, and still then it doesn't hit.
Mm-hmm.
Janet was
Yep, yep.
she was selling sex, but she was selling regalness.
Yeah.
She was
Yes.
it was grand boots. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because again, sexuality that's not okay is sold as dirty and seedy, and these folks aren't looking like that. So
Yep.
this can't be that, right? SUV, even when they was giving Round the Way girl tees, still beautiful. All these things compared to now, where I don't think the songs are so different, but City Girls is gonna give you a good 3 minutes twerking on the side of the beach.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all, right? I think that you look at WAP, I think that was a moment where, one, it was a sickening song,
Mm-hmm.
but it walked this fine line of a very well produced music video, and everyone looked beautiful, but also there were some. It was risque at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't want to underestimate the power of video. Andre Crouch and all them. There was a reason those producers were paid so much.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And as Black folks, I think that once we lost the investment in music videos, the ways that we were
Ooh.
scrutinized increased, right? But that hit me when Louis was talking, because you think at that time those videos were always matched. Even when the women were talking about servitude, it didn't look like that in the video.
Right.
Come on. Yes.
You know what's coming up for me when you say that? I'm thinking of like That's the Way Love Goes, and how
Mhm.
that wasn't like some fancy studio video. I mean, it was a studio video, but I'm like, the scene is real life. It's people sitting in their homes, friends vibing with each other. And that's very different from what we see now. That's very much like, I'm going to give you some detached version of like feminine objectification in a lot of ways, even though, again, I love WAP, right? Like, I'm not gonna knock any of that, but just thinking about what difference is that when you have like, this is what Black femininity is looking like in a real time lived experience versus this is a product that we've manufactured for the next 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 30 seconds for you to just get titillated by. And then again, bringing in sex ed, what then does that do to the consumer, the young consumer who's like just taking it in and trying to imagine what it has to do with their life? So I can definitely see that. This actually makes me think of another piece that we were talking about before, and you had this beautiful, beautiful piece on this where, Dominique, I feel like you had, where you were responding to this idea of like, when adults say, well, what about the kids, right? Like, what do you say to that? Like, when it comes to sexually explicit music, should we be concerned? And if so, in what ways should we be concerned?
Well, for me, it's more of a concern of the lack of the information young people have access to. And I don't think when we did this last time that Call Me By Your Name had come out yet. I don't think it had come out yet.
Not at all.
And
Nope.
and there was an interesting thing with Lil Nas last week, was like, I want people to see me as somebody to look up to, but I'm not here to raise your children. And I think
Fact.
and I think that's important, because if a song is the first place your young person finds out about this, it's not really a reflection of a bad artist or a poor industry. It's a reflection of you haven't offered your child this information. And as a girl who learned how to drive by just trying, I hit a few cars, compared to if my parents had taught me how to drive, right? Like, seriously, like, that's the story,
Right.
right? I think of the same thing. We need to be more aware, that more information does not instinctively mean young folks are going to engage. This is not something you can prevent
Facts.
them from hearing and seeing. right? And
Hmm.
I think there's something powerful when a young person can be in a space and be like, not only am I aware of this, I've seen young people be like, you know what, I know what this is, and this isn't really for me. I don't
Yes.
really live for
Yes.
this. And this is
Yes.
why I don't live for it. And I think that's the real work.
Hmm.
So censoring, trying to prevent young people from seeing stuff that, a Kids Bop version is coming eventually, right? These kids know how to get behind all the paywalls, all the things, when it's at the end of the day, inform these children. And I think that's what I think is so important. I think I said this last time. We're always like, well, these kids are moving so quickly, and anytime I see somebody pull out real a way that we assume they're kind of speeding out, I
Hmm.
think of when a car is being held back and the engine is going and then it peels out.
Yep.
And so it's like, also let us engage in accountability as community, as parents, as trusted adults, as aunties and uncles and family members of, we need to stop ignoring these young people that are giving us all sorts of indicators about what they want to learn about, who they're about to become, the things they about to do, and we doing like this, and they like, oh, you okay, well, I'm gonna speed out. And
Right.
then we like, dang, I wish that somebody would have. They did tell us,
Right.
and we weren't helpful. And so I think those are. I know that's not exactly what I said last time, but that little Nas moment at the intersection of like religion and all of these things, ways they wanted this young person to be accountable for their young person's salvation. I'm like, I thought Jehovah did all that. Like I thought that was like negotiations about,
Right.
say, you know what I'm saying, like my eternity. I don't think Montero like was like, I won't, like that's my
I don't
ministry.
remember. Right. I don't remember Montero saying that that was going to be his responsibility at all. Definitely. Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, no, and you actually did use that car analogy. So I'm like, that's perfect. So I want to go back because we know that. So thinking of your work with Grand Verones, Louis, and how you prioritize the art of storytelling and the importance of people telling their stories. You mentioned when people think about music, like if you can remember something along the lines of if you can remember where you were when you first heard a certain song, then that's really powerful. So I want to ask you both just to tell a story real quick. When was the first time you remember thinking about sexual content in music? And what was it that you were thinking about or interacting with? And what do you feel like you got from that experience? And while you all are thinking, I can share my experience. For me, I never saw sex as a negative thing because I grew up with Luther Vandross. And I distinctly remember listening, not just Luther, Jeffrey Osborne, like folks who were talking about making love, right? And I just remember somehow knowing nobody ever sat me down and said, "Oh, well, this is sex." But I just remember listening to that music and thinking, "Okay, this is something pretty huge." And but also getting like, "Okay, this is not something for me as a 7-year old, as a 6-year old, but it was something that's like, oh, this is the sex thing that you're in love and you're having these moments and whatever, and just remembering and just feeling that sense of like, oh, okay, this is what this is, okay, and that just being a part of my experience. I could go into a bunch of other stories, but how about y'all? When was the first time that you just remember interacting with someone where you were just like, this is a little different, this is a little extra, and what was that like for you?
What coming for me, it's so funny because I can instinctively remember performing with Tia, rest in peace, and Penny, two girls who lived on my block, performing in my house by the Mary Jane Girls in the early 80s. I remember watching Like a Virgin. I remember dancing to Vanity's Nasty Girl, but it never occurred to me that those were songs about sex, right? And even if you look
Yes.
back, how they were considered suggestive. Like all people have to do is Google Tipper Gore and her um
Yes.
her, I don't know what the word is, but her like commitment to like say that music is dirty. We have the parental advisory on albums because of Tipper Gore. And even though I knew that that was happening, I didn't quite understand it. But it was funny how Times Fly by Janet Jackson, the last song on Control,
Hmm.
and the moaning at the end. That's when I knew, like,
Yes.
hold up, right? Because again,
Yes.
that's during the time where anyone who attempts, or any woman who attempts to do something that media, um, you know, experienced or consumed as sexually suggestive was always compared to Madonna.
Mm, hmm.
Like, are you as wild as Madonna? Right. So I think that I had that playing in the background. And Janet Jackson just didn't present, like in 1996, as anybody who was in challenging or standing alongside Madonna and her shtick at the time, right? Because it was like
Uh-huh.
Michael's little sister. The Jacksons
Right.
also had this reputation as being American royalty. But it was getting that cassette and listening to Funny How Time Flies. And I was like, oh, this is
Woo!
without a doubt about
Yeah.
sex. Right.
Yes.
I missed the subtext, or maybe not the so much subtext of Nasty Girl in my house, but I
Right.
get it here. And I think that's also because I'm entering my teens. But again, because it was Janet, I think it hit differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
love Janet. I was listening to what she was saying. I wanted to be grown and have control, and it came across as, um, I don't want to say innocent, but like kind of like a first love, or it sounded like what she imagined sex was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's where I was, and it's I'm on Six and Lehigh in North Philly. Like I can remember like playing on my one speaker, one cassette radio, but that is when I was like,
Yes.
oh, okay, these songs are about sex.
Right. Right. Got you. Dominique, what about you?
Yo, like so I was very like sheltered, and like my parents met in the ninth grade, got married after they graduated high school, and were married for like 27 years when my father passed away. And so it was like that fairy tale thing. It was not a good thing because it made me believe like the first person I loved was the person I was supposed to be with, and I was supposed to, deal with all the things that I saw my parents go through. And I feel like my approach to love really affected how I engage with sex early
Mm-hmm.
on, which was this kind of idea of giving myself. And I was sitting here thinking about what was the first time that I recognized it was saying something deeper. I was in the back seat of a 1988 Ford Taurus Blue,
All right.
and my mother was playing Superwoman by Karen White.
Mm.
And it's that line you just mother said, you said the juice is sour.
It
It
used to be
used to be
so sweet.
sweet, but I can't help but to wonder if you're talking about.
Wow.
And I said,
I don't think I ever thought about
Yo,
that to this
I
moment.
never ever. Bitch, my mind is
Wow.
blown.
Literally.
and and I remember just I remember what, and also watching my mom and my aunties go up listening
Right.
to this song, right? So watching them live, and I want to be like my mom, like all day. So like, yes, you know what I'm saying? But I just remember coming back to that part of the song, and now going forward, like it's 30 some years later, you look at that song and it's really, it's a lament. It's one of the moments that
Yeah.
should be in a Broadway play somewhere. And I just, so that idea of a man really dictating my value and my worth
Uh-huh.
really intersected with how I engage with sex for
Ooh,
like the
huh.
most of my life,
Yeah.
maybe 3 or 4 honestly, of, oh, you say it's not good, then I'm gonna try to do it better. Not you, just not that you're neglecting me by not kissing me today because you've kissed me every other day, and you're weaponizing your love against me. What do I got to do to get you to kiss me
Hmm.
again?
Yeah.
And so like that song came out in '88. I was 6 years old, and so I think me and music really, I was never really, when I was younger, I never was like, I would listen to Adina here and there, you know what I mean? But I was more of a ballad girl, and,
Mm.
all of that. But I bring that up because I think it's important to know that when we're talking about music and education and how we are edifying people through music, it's not going to always be, I'm putting my pussy on his face.
Right.
There's other stories that we're telling to young people that they're taking as Bible,
Right.
that that is, you know, you done said my juice done went bad.
Yeah.
And I
Like, I feel a type of way. I'm out here drinking all my water.
the fact that Babyface wrote that, who he say that to when he put that in there?
Listen, I just need to acknowledge that I'm going to be sitting for a little while about like a whole reimagination of the juice, because that's not what I was thinking until this very moment. But I think I definitely can relate to everything that you said, Dominique, about what it taught, what those songs taught about how you're supposed to show up in relationships. Like, tangentially, I think of often, I tell folks that I remember when Waiting to Exhale came out and that whole soundtrack, and I remember not knowing what they were talking about. I remember not understanding what do you mean waiting to exhale, until I got in my 20s and I started and I was like, oh, okay. And when you go back and you see the sacrifice and the ways that it was like, this is how it means to be in this relationship.
Listen, if y'all love yourselves at all, go on YouTube, find the video of Whitney in the white suit with the Monica 12s on
Hmm.
at the bill at the Billboard Awards singing "Why Does It Hurt So
Yeah.
Bad?" And I think it was really the first time Mother sweated out her lace, because lace wasn't good back then. But sang to the heavens, and that's when I knew what heartbreak was. Waiting
Yeah.
to exhale. I'm trying to be better about niggas ain't shit. I'm really trying to be better about that.
And
And waiting exhaled, my sister, was that moment where I was just like, men are
trash
terrible. And there's a whole album that supports this.
that
You
lays
know
it
what I'm
out,
saying?
that offers receipts
It
in
was
detail.
someone needs to do a real like deep dive on the women, the stories of those women who sang those songs. You gotta think, when Whitney was singing those songs, what she was going through.
Facts.
T-Boz was, T-Boz was going through. Chili, Dallas was taking her through. You look at those stories of what those women were going through. Tony,
Yeah, Tony,
let it go.
Shantae. I think Shantae Moore was on there too. Yeah, it's a
Dante
few
Moore.
folks.
And it's a song by a young lady. I don't think she ever did anything else. It's a song called "How Could You Call Her Your Baby?" And
Yes.
Shauna.
you want to talk about crafting a song,
Yeah.
a delivery?
Yeah. 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 Ooh. Okay. So this goes into the next question that I had that I wanted to come back to from our last conversation about. I've decided to call it the sex ed soundtrack. Right. So the songs that we believe that could be used as baseline for advancing intelligent conversations about sexuality with young people. Dominique, I definitely want to get a song choice from you because that's the one that we missed. But I'm also just thinking about an assignment where young people would be given the space to draft their own songs that represent how they're understanding sexuality, how they're understanding relationships. And I think that we see those models, like you said, of folks who are like, this is my life. This isn't just some shit that I came up with. This is me kind of penning my life and wondering about the benefit of allowing young people that space to really craft what's the song that could facilitate that conversation for me to bring up what's coming up for me as I'm going through my sexual development, my relationship awareness, my understanding of my gender and my sexual orientation and my identity and all of these different things. So I know I just spit out a lot of things. Dominique, real quick, give me, if you were to put it on a soundtrack that you're like, if you're taking a class in my class and I'm using only songs, this is a song that you're gonna learn in this class, what would you pick?
Broken Hearted by Brandy, both versions, the regular and the
Mm,
remix. Because the album version is very sweet, and it seems, very innocent in some ways. And when they put her with Wanye, and again, I think about the backstory of
yeah.
that, and that Wanye cheated on Brandy with Adina Howard, and Brandy got Adina's second album stopped, with Sylvia Rhone and all of that. and you think about like the negotiation of like, if I can't have you, I'm gonna just be brokenhearted forever, and I'm a resigned to that. And I
Mm-hmm.
would young people to do some diving into like, it's okay to feel the sadness, but like, do not speak I'll never have it again over your life into anything. Don't
Yeah.
speak the best I'll ever have into anything. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember listening to those songs and really believing like, I'm meant to hurt. If love don't hurt, if I don't feel brokenhearted,
It
I'm
ain't
not really in
real.
love.
Yeah.
And that was a moment for me.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah,
Facts. Facts. Facts.
and
Facts.
I know I gave an answer last time, but also,
But go ahead with another, because we was
but
trying to get five each.
yeah, but I
So.
think the context of like what could, supporting young people, and because I'm a father of an 18-year-old son, who I think that I talked about sex, or thought that I made it okay, to talk about sex in the household. I get all the reasons why he doesn't want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Mm-hmm.
listened to some of the things he listens to, and my God. But I think that one of the songs, could be Jermaine Stewart's "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off," released in
Mm.
1986. And I think for many reasons,
Yes.
right? Because it's released in 1986 at the height of the AIDS epidemic. So it is like couched as this abstinence only song, but I also think the gender reversal, or what we would have called the gender reversal in 1986. It is the guy Jermaine telling his lover or his partner to slow down. That there's much more to love or much more to our relationship than sex. And we don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
hear that as much, right? There's always this
Right.
expectation or this notion that femmes and women's have to serve or be of service of men in the bedroom, and that men have to lead and charge, um,
Mm-hmm.
and make all those decisions, right? Like they're just there to demand the pleasure that we've been taught to give them. And I think that
Right.
we don't have to take our clothes off is an interesting song. I would love to play it for younger people to see, because like what they hear sonically, right? Because it's very
Yeah.
different than what is happening now. But I think lyrically, I wonder like what kind of conversations they would have around expectations, of men and women, and gender
Mm-hmm.
nonconforming folks when we talk about sex or delaying sex, but still wanting to enjoy our time together.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, I think that's a great song. But also, just because I remember it and I love it, I just remember that song. So the song, I don't know if y'all remember the song I brought up, but I think it's also related to whatever song you did say in that moment, Dominique. I actually brought up R. Kelly, and so I think,
I had said "Age Ain't Nothing But a Number" by Aaliyah is the one that I brought up, and I brought it up not only because of the song, but having a moment when the whole documentary came out, realizing that that man was standing on the corner watching that child on that cover,
mm-hmm,
and how none of us thought that was inappropriate or out of pocket, but that being 14, because Aaliyah and I are, would have been that same age thing. And like, my boyfriend was 21 when I was 16. And
mm-hmm,
really like saying that. And kids still say that to this day.
mm-hmm,
When they
mm-hmm.
bring it up and may have never even heard that song. And I'm just like, well, I know how I was kind of influenced, but y'all, who's saying that out there to y'all?
Right, right.
Yes, that's what we said. I was talking about Aaliyah, and then, honey, we went to the aura.
Yeah, the aura. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so definitely there. Any other folks that you feel like, either artists or songs that you feel like, you know what, the Sex Ed soundtrack, this is what I would have in my soundtrack.
I think Rockin' Knockin' the Boots is
Oh,
important. And you notice I gave it a Caucasian important, because I wanted y'all to hear it all. Just because on the flip side, I think it's really important to talk about like not all sex interaction has to be romantic or has to be about love. It can just be about pleasure. It can be
yes.
rough. And rocking, knocking some boots gives a certain connotation, that just hits. If the boots have been knocked, honey, that's a blessing.
Right.
And so, yeah, I remember I remember that little moment of in the '90s being like, I know I'm not supposed to listen to this, but knocking the boots, ooh, that sound cute.
Right. And let's talk about both versions, right? Because there's H Town and there's Candyman, and both of them are equally as entertaining. So that is also yes. Louis, how about you?
I'm only going to because I have been thinking about this because it would be 30 years since it's released around this time. Is Whitney Houston's Miracle. It's not necessarily
Oh
about sex, but I've
yes,
always wondered if it was
yeah.
about
It's
abortion.
supposed to be, right? I thought it was supposed
It
to
was about
be.
her miscarriage. It was about her miscarriage. And it's, I think, the only song that Whitney wrote lyrics to. It's the only song that she has writing credits. And it was
Oh
about her
wow.
miscarriage. Because she was
Okay,
pregnant
and
in that I'm Your Baby Tonight era. She was pregnant.
yeah.
And I think, like, coming off the tour or something like that, she had a miscarriage. And that's what Miracle is about.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if it was listening to Robin's autobiography, but I thought it was about an abortion or something. I thought she had said that it was about abortion, but I think both of those discussions can be that song can be used to elevate both of those discussions. Definitely, definitely. Um my final offer, not final offering, but my offering to the conversation would be anything produced by the one and only Missy Elliott. I just feel like that whole catalog gave us so many things that I listen to now and I'm just like, wow. So, Pussy Don't Fail Me Now. Just I mean, just anything. Take away. Like there's just so many songs. 1 Minute Man,
One Minute
like
Man.
that was
Yep.
one, but I was also just thinking of is it worth it? Work it.
Yeah. Yes.
Let me
Yes.
work it. I flip my thing. Yeah, like it's just and I feel like there's so many pieces in there where in terms of talking about like body positivity, right? The fact that she wasn't slim, the fact that she was empowered, right? So talking about sexual empowerment, talking about always femmes pleasure, like really flipping the script on what we learned in the 90s about, like no, actually, this is what you're gonna do. I want to find out if you can work it. I want to find out if you're good at this. So this was another new question. We'll see if it ends up in the final episode. But one that came up for me is if you had to pick who is one music artist besides Dominique that you would consider taking a sex ed class from and why?
Good question. This is a dope ass bonus track.
Yes.
Hmm. Okay, hold on. Let me.
You know, um,
Hmm.
I'm torn. But you know what? I feel like the quiet folks is the one that's really freaky. I would want to take a sex ed class from Barbara Streisand. This has
Word.
seen a lot. And she been
Okay.
deep in the streets. And the way she sung No More Tears, she done seen some things, huh?
Mm.
And she done had all sorts of men. You know, she done did her thing, and I feel like it would be real cunty, and it would be a sickening moment. You know, I would
Okay.
live.
I love that. I love that. Louis?
Oh my God. I am. Let me think. Hold on. Give me 30 seconds. Because this is a
Okay.
great fucking question that even
It
I have
is.
never thought about. Um,
Okay.
I am going to go with. I'm trying not to say Janet, um,
Although,
but I'm inclined to because if I chart my own sexual development, it is through her music,
yeah.
right? Like so, like the more comfortable we think, or like the more comfortable she presented about her body and her sexuality, from like Control all the way until Demeter Joe and all the album after that, like that charts my development around sex and
Hmm.
all my ideas around sex, ones that were
Uh-huh.
progressive and not, like me going back and forth about, because I remember thinking that if I was the first to suck the dick in a relationship, that meant that could be something held over me. Of course, like as an
Mm.
adult looking back now, I'm like, but I made those separations, and I know that those separations were gendered, right? It was
Right.
like, don't make the first move, right?
Hmm.
Because that would mean something. But I would say Janet, because it revealed itself slowly
Yeah.
through every album, right?
Yeah.
And it progressed through every album, good or bad, right? Like, cause there was times I was like, "Girl, I get it. Can I get
Right.
can I get another bop though?" Um, but I think that, she's older now, and I think that there is so much to be learned from her journey, especially for
Yeah.
those who are now parenting, who
Mm,
relate to that journey, and what we can, how can we recognize that in our young people? Because I'm sure there are artists that are charting my son's development that I don't know about. But how can I
hmm.
be more cognizant about that? How can
Right.
I, use the music he's listening to as conversation starters?
Right. 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 Right.
Yeah, so I would say Janet.
I love that.
For an honorable mention to Karen Clark Sheard for me, because church people is freaky as hell. And
Come
Yes,
on.
yes.
There's a bomb in Gilead has a whole different meaning, a whole different connotation. Come
listen,
on.
Lawrence was teaching sis, so just shout out to Mother Karen.
All right. I said for me, actually, I might be willing to take a class from Erica Badu. I feel like her whole trajectory, not just even her music, but her life, I'm like, there's power there. Like, there's a reason why all that Badu Pussy incense sold out. And I just want to know. I just want to elevate my own game. So I would be
Yeah.
sitting in that. Yeah, I would be sitting in that
Yeah.
class.
You would need aftercare. You would need aftercare. Because I feel like it would be intense as hell.
Yes, yes. But also just very magical. Like, I just feel like I just could manifest some things. And I just feel like I'm ready for that. I'm ready for that.
Mm.
Dominique, one song from your album that would be on the Sex Ed soundtrack.
Probably the You Can Get a Remix with Miss Mikey
Yes.
because when I built that song, You Can Get It, the original was like one of the first like sexual songs that I wrote. And I wanted to write something that felt like the 90s. And we put Nan Nigga in there. There's a little bit of Kia in there. There's Throw That Ass in the Circle, a sample in there. And Mikey came in there with that very Kim, that very 90s raw vibe on his verse. And it just feels, if it feels sexual, but it feels sexual like from my independence. It doesn't feel
Hmm.
like a servitude sexuality. I feel sexy whether somebody's here or not. And if you here and you get to and we enjoy it together, that's all the better. But I'm still like twerking in the house by myself and getting my life. And I
Yeah.
wanted people to feel like that. And so yeah, I would say that.
Okay. Bet. Okay, so we are almost done, but I realized there's a question that I ask all my guests that I didn't actually get to ask either one of you. And so I want to ask it right now. And it's particularly, especially on a day such as this for you, Dominique. I would love for you both to think about kind of where you are and who you are as a sex ed professional and what you feel like in that is your either your legacy or your significance or your what your role is in terms of sex ed or just kind of where we are as a world and as a community. What do you feel like the impact is that you either are making or intend to make in this life? So whoever wants to go first.
I think for me, a lot of people talk about sex ed for all. That might be in somebody's mission statement, child, and I'm not trying to be shady by saying that.
It's okay.
Is it? Is it?
It's okay. It is
Okay.
all
So,
right. It is all right.
what I want to say is that I believe in it, but I think that when I've heard folks say it, it's like, oh, we want people to know about sex ed to address these other things that like impact society. I want everyone to know about sex ed because I see the power in them understanding themselves and understanding others. And as an abolitionist, I truly believe sex education is a tool to get us to a world where we don't depend on systems. And
Hmm.
so, what I hope I've brought to it, and the reason that I've done my best to continue to engage, although my day job has shifted, is because I don't want to lose that connection for myself as a kid that grew up in group homes and all those things that didn't really get that until I got into work. But two, I don't want y'all to not understand that a lot of people are going to prison and having issues in relationships and community because y'all haven't taught them about emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like it's something powerful there. And also sex educators are some of the most skilled people I know. Y'all have to be the most skilled. Like the development isn't so important. Why would I not want the most skilled, brilliant people facing towards one of the biggest issues? Yes, all of these things around sexual health, but mass incarceration and these other health disparities that are intertwined with sexual health.
Right.
So that's what I try to do, and that's what I hope I'm known for as I do the work, and
Mm-hmm.
when I go to glory.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Louie.
I think with the work of Gravadones, like me and Armante, we're always talking about this, especially when we get invited to present at Latino conferences. And I think a lot of our work is, and I'd like to say that some of the sex ed geared or designed for Latino, or HIV prevention messaging for specifically Latino gay men is not necessary, but there needs to be this. We work to remind people that Latino is not a race,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, some Latinos, how people interact with them has to do with their phenotype, how they present, and reminding people that, like Dominique just mentioned, if we're committed to sex ed for all, then that requires work even when we're working in focused communities,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because even in 2021, I will be in meetings and the regressive ideas around like reaching Latino gay men are rooted in anti-blackness. There's this
Mm-hmm.
assumption that because this is said in this way or has this colors or this person is on this poster that it would reach all Latinos when in reality
Mm-hmm.
that is not the case, right?
Right.
And so I think with the work that me and Armando try to do with Gravadones is one to remind people that Latino is not a race, that people interact with Black Latinos very differently. Like, how Black Latinos present, how they speak, how people see them dictates who they are and how we move through the world. And that includes sex ed. So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that the tools that have been provided are not enough. It for those tools to remind us that there's so much more for us to build. How do we use the tools that we now have in order to build and stay rooted in our commitment that sex ed is for all? That is a challenge for me. That is a challenge for Armante. That is a challenge for everyone that we work with. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that I'm more comfortable and more confident. And now that I have the language to communicate that, I didn't always have the language to communicate that. I think that people always experienced me as a person who didn't like anything or who was always critiquing something, right? And therefore, for years, I would
Mm-hmm.
say, why aren't people inviting me to Latino conferences or groups? I no longer have that feeling because I know now why, right?
Yeah.
And when I do decide, I now know how to articulate. Me and Armante know how to articulate the work that needs to be done. You want us to participate in the work? Well, this is what we bring to
Needs
the
to
work,
happen.
and
Right.
this is what needs to happen. If you're committed to this, then we are totally down to go through the rough spot, have the hard conversation. If it means that on the other side of that, that there is more expansive conversations around Black Latinos and sex ed.
Yeah. Oof. Y'all are just I'm so grateful for the people that I know that y'all just so fucking dope. Um, Dominique, I'm gonna give you any last words that you want to share because I have Louis' last words on the last track. So I want to give you any last words.
My last word is just an addendum to the playlist. I want to give a shout out to Robin for a
Oh
little song
yeah.
called "Show Me Some Respect." And I remember it was 1998. I was, a young lady twirling around my high school in the sophomore year, and sis said, if you really want me, show me that I'm special, honey."
Mm-hmm.
And 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 then he obviously didn't because sis said I'm out here dancing on my own a few years later. And I just I just want to give honor today.
Yes.
giving us that bop about, listen, you gonna respect me, you gonna treat me right, or you gotta hit the bricks. Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe. And I'm just reminded, I'm just thinking in this moment, thinking of what you just said, Louie, about the tools and the tools that we have available. I think this conversation really just shows that when we are skilled in the ways that Dominique mentioned, we can use our music in really constructive ways, in powerful ways, to really get young people engaged and get them thinking more critically about their lived experience and not just taking things in, right? If we had another 5 hours, which we don't, we could talk about all the ways that, yeah, you could learn a lot of things. That doesn't mean you're going to do them, because you have people in your life who are teaching you how to be critical, who are teaching you how to be responsive, who are teaching you how to be mindful about the music that you take in, and not just giving you things and then judging you for how you're processing it. So we are done, and that is the end. So
you've been listening to T.S.O.B. with Dr. G, produced by Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert of Tembe and Aya. To keep up with all things T.S.O.B., follow us on social media at T.S.O.B. the podcast, which you can find on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. For past episodes of the show, visit tsobpodcast.com or subscribe to the show either on YouTube or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Now, don't forget that you've got homework for this episode. To find the downloadable worksheet for this or any other episode of the show, head on over again to tsobpodcast.com, where you'll find it and any other important information from the show notes. And finally, do you have any questions or thoughts to share? Sound off by email at mailbox@tsobpodcast.com. Again, this was T.S.O.B., the sex ed of Black folk. Thank you for listening. Talk again soon.